bigcal and welcome to my world. Today I'm going to be reviewing Donkey Kong Country Tropical Freeze on the Nintendo Wii U. Released in February 2014, slightly different days depending on your region, but all in February, Donkey Kong Country Tropical Freeze was a sequel to the highly acclaimed Wii title Donkey Kong Country Returns. Now, back in the days of the Super Nintendo, Rare were behind creating some of the most beloved 16-bit platformers around in the Donkey Kong Country series. 3 games were released for the Super Nintendo, followed by 3 more for the Game Boy and Game Boy Color, and then ports of the 3 Super Nintendo games were also ported to handheld consoles. Following the SNES was the Nintendo 64, and like most companies at the time, Rare decided to take a step into the 3D world and create a Donkey Kong game simply entitled Donkey Kong 64, ending the 2D style platforming series that was Donkey Kong Country. A few years later, Rare was purchased by Microsoft and thus ended the great days of Rare. Fast forward to 2010 and a new developer known as Retro Studios was given the task of creating the first Donkey Kong Country game since 1997 with the release of Donkey Kong Land 3 on the Game Boy. They had big shoes to fill, with the original Donkey Kong Country series being so beloved, and they delivered and then some. It was a highly acclaimed game, absolutely fantastic, and they did a wonderful job of still giving us the feel of the old Donkey Kong Country games, but adding enough new stuff in it and a new style and their own touches to it, so it wasn't simply a remake as such of the original games. Because that did so well, Nintendo put Retro Studios back to work for a new Donkey Kong Country game on their newer console, the Nintendo Wii U, and thus we ended up with Donkey Kong Country Returns Tropical Freeze. The Nintendo Wii U now supported HD graphics, and believe me, the bright, colourful world of the Donkey Kong Country series truly benefited from these improved visuals, and we got a spectacular looking game. But of course, when it comes to games, looks really aren't everything. So let's take a look and see if this game matched up in gameplay compared to its visuals. Firstly, let's just go over the story for the game. So, it's Donkey Kong's birthday. He's celebrating, of course, with a banana. Unbeknownst to him, an evil tribe of snowmads are sailing on the way to Kong Island and are hell-bent on freezing it. They do succeed in this, and during the whole freezing process, Donkey Kong, his family and friends are all knocked off the island to another faraway island, and that's where our game begins. Yeah, it's not much of a story, but let's face it, it's a 2D platformer. How many of these things have in-depth stories? So let's firstly talk about one of my main issues with the game, unfortunately. The game itself is called Donkey Kong Country Tropical Freeze. The main plot point is that an evil tribe of snowmads are here to freeze Kong Island, which they do. So I was expecting the game to be, like a tropical island, but frozen. You'd have frozen palm trees and ice blocks everywhere that you could maybe break to get bananas that would just normally be there for you in ordinary Donkey Kong Country games. The water would be frozen with the occasional hole in there you could swim down, for the water parts of the levels. Unfortunately, there was that little bit of information that I gave when I told you the story of the game. Kong Island is frozen, and during that process, Donkey Kong and his family and friends are knocked off to a faraway island, which is where the game begins. There are separate islands that you play through before you get to Kong Island. Kong Island is the only frozen island in the game. And that's where my problem lies. It's called Tropical Freeze. I was expecting tropical lands frozen, but we only get that in the final world, World 6. World 5 just has one level that's frozen. There is one level in World 5 that is frozen, followed by the boss fight, which is done on ice, but that doesn't count because it's just a small, tiny area. And I was really disappointed with that. In fact, it's all done backwards to how I was expecting it to be. It's called Tropical Freeze, so like I said, I assumed everything was going to be frozen from the get-go. That's the story, is that snowbirds come and freeze things. So I was expecting the earlier levels to be fully frozen. Everything is fully frozen. Ice blocks everywhere, frozen water, all that nonsense. And then as you progress through the game, you would maybe disrupt the power of the magical freezing Viking horn thing that the snowmads have that they use to freeze it. So whenever you defeat a boss, some power would be lost, and the next world would be slightly less frozen. You would maybe see, icicles and dripping with a bit of water. A lot more things are now unfrozen, some things are only half frozen, things like that. That would be a great visual style for the game. You'd have half a palm tree frozen, icicles dripping down everywhere. Maybe the water's so cold that it drips, you have to avoid it, things like that. So when you get to the final world, maybe after defeating World 5 boss, almost everything is completely thawed out by now, but the final boss, grabs the horn again and refreezes Kong Island completely for the final world. Something like that. But instead, no, it's all backwards to me, where you build up to the frozen island and that's just the last thing, and then you defeat the boss and it all unfreezes, and that was that. So very little of the actual, freeze part of the game, and it just left me really disappointed, because I thought the whole concept of everything being frozen throughout the entire game would have been really fucking cool. Sadly, it didn't turn out like that. Moving on from the problem though, let me talk about some of the good that's here, and yes, there is a lot of good in this game. Firstly, as I mentioned, the visuals are stunning. Each world has a bunch of themed levels to them, and they're just absolutely wonderful. For starters, the underwater levels are great, or even just normal levels with underwater sections. You get this nice, calm, peaceful feel as you're swimming close to the surface under the water, and then the further down you go, you get more of an atmosphere when it gets darker under the water, and it just feels really cool. One of my favourite set of levels in the world were the ones with based around fruit and a bunch of machines that were squishing the fruit and turning it all into juice. It was just so colourful and vibrant and fantastic. And this really does show where the HD comes into play, because Donkey Kong Country Returns could have never had visuals on this level. So the Wii U is a huge benefit to Donkey Kong Country Tropical Freeze in that aspect. The levels, of course, need to be talked about too. In a 2D platformer game, if you don't have great levels, you might as well not bother releasing the game at all. No such problems here. Now, each world does have specific themed levels, but it's not like Super Mario World and the later Super Mario games where each world is a specific theme. It's not quite done like that. Because it's all set in tropical islands, tropical island is the main sort of theme, and then in each world you'll have a couple of different theme levels scattered about. And these are all done wonderfully. They've all got the different visuals to them, of course, and then they really add some unique takes onto these levels with the different game mechanics that certain levels will have and certain levels will remove. One level might consist mostly of precision platforming, and then the next could see you almost having to race through, avoiding things falling on top of you or platforms beneath you from falling apart, and using barrels to shoot you to the next location to continue through to the end. And then of course we have the crazy minecart levels and rocket barrels that range from super fun to oh my god, why did they make this? I cannot tell you how many times I died during these levels, most of the time in certain places. But thankfully it was never frustrating enough to where I wanted to just quit the game. I wanted to keep going until I got it. Until one such level. Now, this one such level does bring about another big negative I have for the game. Thankfully, it does only appear to be in this one level, but it was so frustrating that it was one of those parts where I almost felt like just throwing the controller down and quitting. Thankfully I kept with it, but I can see it being one of those times where people would just give up on the game entirely. So let's talk about that level in a little more detail. It is of course a minecart level. Okay, let me try and explain the best I can here. Minecart levels are typically just 2D. You're in a minecart, you must jump to avoid gaps, enemies and obstacles, or occasionally duck under things. Simple enough on paper. However, this one particular minecart level decides to give us more of a 3D feel by having us switch between tracks on different planes. Again, on paper this should be simple enough, right? Wrong. The way the camera positioned really fucks you over. It's not a normal side-on view. It's sort of at a 45-degree angle. So when it comes time to change track, instinctively you want to press either up or down, or at least I did. But no, you have to press either left or right, and my brain just could not seem to get to grips with it because the camera view made it seem like these tracks were above or below you, rather to the left or right. To make matters worse, right after this section, the game throws you into a 5-track section where the camera moves behind you and the left and right control scheme works perfectly because that's how it looks as you play. So that was one of the parts of the game, in fact the only part of the game really, where I just wanted to pack the whole thing in, but I did persevere and I finally beat it. And thankfully that was the end of that awful weird camera angle control scheme part. Thankfully. If you make it past these levels, and very difficult ones in that instance, you of course get to a boss at the end of each world. Now, each boss is challenging in their own way usually, mostly because they do take a lot of hits. I believe it's 9 hits each boss takes, with the exception of the final boss, which I swear takes 1 billion. And of course each of them have their own pattern, and after 3 hits each of the patterns for a boss changes. So you'll start off getting used to it one way, hitting 3 times, he'll get more angry and the pattern will change and he'll do new things. And it's an interesting challenge. Sure, I died a lot of times during these, but I always kept going because it was fun and I liked figuring out the patterns of the bosses and figuring out a way to avoid them and continue on. The water level boss, strangely enough, on paper looks to be the most difficult. You're underwater, obviously, and you actually have a breath meter, oxygen meter, and you have to keep obviously refilling it from bubbles which provide you with oxygen. And on top of that, the entire little screen, the arena that you're in, is surrounded by spikes. Touch them and you lose some life. So it does seem like this would be the most difficult boss on paper, but honestly I actually found it to be the easiest, which was quite a surprise for me. And then we get to that final boss that I mentioned that takes 1 bazillion hits. Just when you think you've got his patterns down, you've hit him a number of times, he'll change up, you'll avoid those, hit him a number of times again, and then fucking ice dragons! What? He literally just starts throwing ice dragons at you. You are not prepared for this. You have no idea these are coming unless you've died 1 billion times at this point and know that they're coming. Jesus Christ, it does kind of feel a bit cheap because, you know, while the pattern does change up, the attack types remain sort of the same, whether it was throwing ice blocks at you or whatever. I can't quite remember what the final boss does, but at one point when he just starts flinging ice dragons at you, you have no idea this is coming. There is no way of knowing that this is going to happen unless you haven't played the game yet and I'm spoiling it for you. Or like I said, you've got up to this point and he's thrown the ice dragons at you and killed you and you had to do it again. Seriously, ice dragons. Throws them at you. Out of nowhere. Just utterly fucking insane. And At this point, this boss is where it really did feel tedious and boring to do. The other bosses, even though I died, like I said, I enjoyed figuring out the patterns and just keeping going and finally achieving something at the end when I defeat them. This boss just kept on going forever. The ice dragons was thrown out. It's like, what the fuck? It just doesn't seem to die no matter how many times you hit the bastard. And I really got fed up. Got to the point where I almost gave up, but it was late at night. I turned the game off, and then I came back to it the next day, all refreshed, did it first time. Just kind of happens like that, I guess. But that was the point in time where I thought, my God, this is tedious. Thankfully, that was the only boss I did get that feeling with. However, if I had died a few more times on that morning instead of beating it first time, I may very well have just given up for the time being. Overall, Donkey Kong Country Tropical Freeze was a really fun game, albeit slightly disappointing in certain areas. The length, it took me exactly 9 hours to complete the main game, going through the main levels, defeating the main bosses and completing it that way. It did feel a little short for me just because I kind of blasted through it in 2 days, essentially. I got it on the Friday afternoon, and I had everything done except for the final boss by Saturday night, loaded it up on Sunday morning, one try at the final boss and I was done. And it did feel incredibly short to me, but I guess 9 hours for a 2D platformer is probably going to be about average. So, like I said, it didn't feel like it lasted that long to me just because I did it in such a short space of time, but I would have liked it to have continued on longer, more levels, more worlds. It would have been nice, maybe just to go to 8 worlds or something. I don't know. Of course, the other disappointing bit for me was the whole freeze aspect, which I felt was backwards and should have built up to being unfrozen rather than starting off unfrozen and building up to frozen. But that is just me. However, like I said, this game is still a ton of fun. Level designs are fantastic, really had a blast going through them all. There is some challenge here. There are lots of difficult parts where you will die a lot, but you rarely get to the point where you just want to give up. You want to keep going, you want to feel like you've accomplished something when you've done it. Great variety in levels as well, underwater levels, minecart, rocket barrels, things like that, silhouette style levels, levels where you've got to do lots of climbing on vines and things like that, avoiding things that are going to kill you, and that's a lot of variety. It's just a ton of fun to play. There are some smaller issues for me with this game as well. You do have the very tedious final boss fight, which again, the ice dragons that it throws at you do feel a bit cheap to take away some of your health. A bit of the controls, smashing and pounding on the ground is the same button as rolling. Only you roll when you're moving, obviously, but sometimes, because there is weight behind the Donkey Kong character, when you jump, sometimes you think, am I going to make this tiny gap? Because you feel really heavy, like, a giant fucking ape or gorilla or whatever the hell Donkey Kong actually is. So that is a good part to it. You don't feel floaty, not like Mario and you'll be able to bounce around. You're a big fucking gorilla type thing. But sometimes when you're running and you come to a stop and you want to pound on something, you might not have come to a complete stop yet and you'll end up rolling, which of course could result in rolling over an edge or rolling into an enemy that has spikes that you can't kill that way, and it can get a little bit frustrating if you keep doing it over and over again, which again I did quite a few times, especially at particular points, because I thought I'd stopped moving and the game said, nope, you're still moving, so roll. So there is that. And then one of the other small issues I have is that, like a lot of the Donkey Kong Country games, probably all of them I think, you do have support characters. Now in previous ones, or at least going back just to Donkey Kong Country Returns, you had Diddy Kong with you. And if you jumped and held in the jump button, you would hover for a short period of time, which was very useful. In this one, Diddy Kong is back of course, but you also have Dixie Kong and Cranky Kong with you. Cranky Kong, he uses his cane to sort of like pogo stick, very similar to Scrooge McDuck in the DuckTales games, and Shovel Knight in Shovel Knight. So that's kind of cool, but I found it utterly useless. And then we have Dixie Kong, who hovers as well, just like Diddy Kong, but also at the very end, just before you drop, will raise up slightly, which can help you, get items higher up or reach platforms. And honestly, she then completely makes Diddy Kong utterly useless. So for me, I didn't see the point in using either Diddy Kong or Cranky Kong. Yeah, it was nice to have the choice, but they didn't matter. They didn't mean anything. Once you had Dixie Kong, you were fine. That's all you needed throughout the game. I never at one point found a specific use for Diddy Kong or Cranky Kong. So just like, what's the point? They're completely obsolete. Dixie Kong was the only support character you actually needed in the game. Enough of the negatives though, let's talk about the positives, because there are a ton. The game, like I said, is really fun. It's a great game overall. Visuals are stunning in HD, all the colours are vibrant and fantastic. Sound and music is just wonderful, like you would expect in the Donkey Kong Country game. Level designs are great. Controls and game mechanics are fantastic for the most part. There are only very tiny problems there that I did mention. Levels, there are tons of unique levels, they all look great. And even the underwater levels I really enjoyed, which normally I absolutely hate. Not only that, but these underwater levels have an air meter, which would normally add to the hatred of these levels, but for some reason here I loved them. And they did some very unique things with them. I did mention earlier, the underwater levels, when you get deeper down, it does get dark, which happens in real life. And they do have a little cool bit with fish that have lights on them to see underwater, which of course also is true. And you'll have to sort of follow them and keep up with them to get through the level, which is a really cool idea. The rocket barrel levels here did seem easier than in Returns, so I was able to enjoy them a lot more by not dying hundreds of times, and the same can be said for minecart levels too, except that particular one I already talked about. Oh, and I cannot forget about Rambi the Rhinoceros levels. Nothing more fun than jumping around on a charging rhino running through enemies and walls on your way to the end of a level. I would have liked for at least an animal helper for the underwater levels as well, and maybe some others scattered throughout, but I guess I was just happy with Rambi showing up every now and then anyway, so it was all fine with me. Each level has more to offer than simply getting to the end, with secret exits to unlock new levels in each world, and the return of the Kong letters and puzzle pieces too. For completionists, they will have plenty to do trying to collect all of these, as well as unlocking the hidden levels, collecting the mysterious relics, which unlock another world at the end of the game, featuring much more challenging levels, time trials, and a hard mode. For me, this isn't something I was really interested in doing. Honestly, going through each level and trying to collect each Kong letter, and collecting all the puzzle pieces, and then going through the hidden levels and going to the end and finding the hidden relics, those mysterious relics, and opening up all those new worlds, honestly kind of felt like a bit of a chore for me. Yes, I did unlock a couple of extra levels here and there, but I never had any desire to collect everything in every single level. However, for more hardcore gamers who want much more of a challenge, it really is great that this is available if you want to do it. You don't have to do it, but it's there if you want to, and that's fantastic. While a lot of people say that Nintendo games are far too easy and focused on kids, it is nice to see that a game like this does have something for the more hardcore gamers and the completionists who really want a challenge. Since Cranky Kong is used as a support character, we get a Funky's Flying By shop to use those coins on. Here you can buy more lives, pointless collectibles, and then helpful items that you can take with you to each level, such as an extra heart of health, a green balloon that will, for one time only, prevent you from falling down a hole, a blue balloon that will refill your oxygen meter if you drown while underwater, because where else would you drown, Squawks the bird, who will help you find puzzle pieces in a level. Crash Guard, that will give you an extra hit for a vehicle. Banana Juice, that will make you invincible for 15 seconds after you take damage for the first time. And then Barrels for the support characters, allowing you to start a level with whoever you want, rather than waiting to unlock them in a barrel which will appear within the level. Now, honestly, the only item that I ever used was the extra heart, which would just take into me with a boss battle, but I guess it's nice to know that all those others are there if you needed them. Although perhaps I would have died a lot less if I did take a green balloon into every level with me, because, you know, I did fall down a ton of pits. Yeah. So, taking everything into account, I think it's time that I gave my final impressions of Donkey Kong Country Tropical Freeze. It is a great game, but it does have its flaws. Firstly, the fact that it only really took me 2 days to complete did kind of feel pretty short. Like I said, it did take me 9 hours just to do the very basics, which I guess is a good time for a 2D platformer. And if you did want to be a completionist, you have all the Kong letters and the puzzle pieces, the hidden levels and mysterious relics, and that end hidden world with the extra, you know, hard mode that you can do to increase the time that you play the game. Just, you know, it just didn't really appeal to me personally. And then we also do have a couple of frustrating levels, mainly that damn minecart level with the weird camera angle and controls, the frustrating final boss, and the fact that your companions that you can take with you, only one of them is actually useful, which was Dixie Kong. Aside from those, you know, small negatives, I genuinely just had an absolute blast playing this, even if it was just for the 2 days. It was fantastic. Like I said, the levels look amazing. And there's great atmosphere in them from both the visuals and the sound and the music. You know, 1 minute you'll be just, you know, in a jolly old beach level, just, you know, going along the beach, you've got the sea there, it's just happy and fun. And then the next thing you know, really atmospheric levels, such as one of the silhouette levels, which is visually very impressive, considering it really is just black. You know, but it does have a lot of variety to the game, a lot of variety to the levels. It does have a lot of challenge here in the game, even for seasoned players, to prevent them from simply wandering through each level like it was nothing. But at the same time, anyone can pick this up, learn how to play immediately, and have a blast doing it. The only real main negative for me was the whole freeze part, which again I just felt was done backwards. But thankfully there are plenty more positives than there are negatives. Most of the negatives are just small little things that bugged me personally, with the exception of the freeze thing, which I felt was the main one. So, overall this game is fantastic with flaws, but still absolutely well worth picking up for the Nintendo Wii U, especially now it's part of the Nintendo Selects. The base price for this is $19.99. Shop around online, you can get this for about £15, which is a fucking bargain for one of the best platforming games on the Nintendo Wii U. However, I do think it doesn't quite match up to its predecessor, Donkey Kong Country Returns on the Nintendo Wii, but that is just me. Overall, I give this a score, a very respectable score of 88 out of 100. So, I'm bigcal, thanks for watching, I'll see you again next time.